Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD Bodybuilder, back with another video in my 2020 contest prep series. So it's been a while and I wanted to just update you guys. We're getting really close. I'm 2.5 weeks out today and there's definitely been a lot going on. So we'll go over a physique update, talk about the changes in my diet, training, and some challenges that I've been facing. Alright, so we're going to start off with a physique update. So now that I'm competing in bodybuilding and classic, I've had to learn all of the mandatory bodybuilding poses, which was quite a task, and it definitely took a learning curve in terms of figuring out how to pose with my legs. So here you can check out my conditioning. I'm really happy to see glute striations coming in, and you've got good definition of the lower lats, and we're seeing those erectors come out with some striations. My posing is still pretty shoddy at this point, but hey, check out some side glute striations here. You can tell I'm still a relative newbie at posing since I'm swinging around so much. I'm definitely not hitting them and sticking them like I should be, and I still have yet to solidify my transitions and setups for these poses. So you'll be seeing more of that later. Anyways, in terms of conditioning, I'm pretty happy. Definitely butchered this side pose in terms of my leg positioning, but we'll have to figure that out. We've got some time to practice still. In terms of my back poses, I'm really happy that I'm getting the lower lats and this definition in my lower back and some lower glute striations. Here's a good spot where you can see the lower back striations. Really happy with those. So there's just a tiny little bit of fat on the lower back there still at the bottom. Side triceps is my favorite pose, and I'm really happy with how this one's looking. Let me know what you think about this variation with one leg forward that I swap into here. It shows off one or two striations in my vastus medialis. So in terms of conditioning, I think the last things we're missing are just a little bit more of the striations in the lower back. I need my glute striations to be crisper, and we're also looking for a few more striations in my vastus medialis. So if I'm able to get those in, I will be very happy with my conditioning and will be confident stepping on stage. It's actually crazy how much has been happening with every increment of weight loss at this point, so there really isn't much fat left to lose. This is from 6 weeks out, where I cut my dinner carbs in half from 300 grams of rice to 150 grams of rice. And I also swapped my half a bagel in the morning for a whey shake. This is actually the same number of calories, but I did the swap to make sure my protein stays up since I am losing some protein when I cut my carb sources. At this point, my macros were around 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, and 35 grams of fat. So somewhere around 1870 calories. And then more recently, at 3 weeks out, I did another cut where I basically just removed my pre-workout piece of fruit, cut down another 25 or so grams of carbs, and now I'm at around 1770 calories. The last time we talked was when I had a diet break for my USMLE exam and I had a trip to Philly in New York. At that point I was around 149.4, and since then my weight has dropped to about 147.2 at the lowest. It doesn't look like there's that many changes in terms of actual prep lows. I've marked out my prep lows in green, but I have been tracking some averages on the corner over here, and I can tell that there has been some change. I think I've lost about half a pound this week, so I'm pretty happy with that. We've got one more week of dieting, and I think I'm going to keep my macros the same. And then here's a very tentative plan for peak week. I think I'm going to carb deplete for the first 3 days and then carb load with 550 grams of carbs, then 450, and then we'll see what happens on Friday in terms of how I look to guide my carb intake. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how things are going at this point. Now, in terms of training, I think the main changes that I've been making have been with exercise selection. So I've been replacing a lot of my heavy free weight compound movements with machine movements. To go through a few of them, all my squats have gone to leg press. I've replaced some of my RDLs with a 45-degree back extension with barbell. I've replaced heavy weighted pull-ups with a lat pull-down variation. Now I do usually like to prioritize free weight movements, but contest prep is somewhat of an exception where fatigue becomes a limiting factor. So even though I do prefer using heavy free weight movements as my main heavy overloading movement for muscle groups during the off season, at this stage of extreme leanness, I've been moving towards, quote, easier exercises just to get through my workouts. Now, general principles of exercise selection still apply. You can check out my video on that, but basically I'm swapping compound movements for other compound movements, and they're still very amenable to progressive overload. I've definitely found these machine exercises to involve less stabilization work and overall less mental preparation to carry out. And I still feel like I get a really good stimulus in my target muscles, so I don't think we're losing any muscle mass. I think this is actually one of the reasons why you see a lot of the old IFBB pros doing a lot of pump and isolation work later in contest prep. Some of it is just to conserve energy and manage fatigue. When they say that this kind of work gives them more striation, I think this is really just the result of them getting lean. I've also had a number of my previous injuries flare up during this last stage of contest prep. So I've gotten tendonitis in my biceps, in my triceps, in my pecs, and in my patellar tendons. Let me know if you want to cover this in detail later, but basically how I managed my tendonitis is that first of all, I will take a break, so take a focused deload. With my quads, for example, just last week, I just took a workout completely off quads. The next thing I might try and do is move towards lighter weights and higher rep ranges. I find that heavier weights tend to put more stress on connective tissues. And then after that, I'll usually try and switch up my exercise because chronic injuries are usually the result of the body being stressed in a progressive way over a repetitive movement pattern over time. So over the last few weeks, I've actually been systematically turning over all of my exercises for pretty much my whole program. I actually strategically saved my exercise variation for this point in prep. I've kept my exercises more or less the same throughout the initial stages of prep in anticipation that I would be able to switch them out when things got hard and I wanted that novelty stimulus. The thing about swapping out to a new exercise is that you can really drop the weight a lot and still get a good stimulus out of it. If you've noticed, often when you switch to a new exercise, your muscle's going to be sore even if you only do a couple sets of it. In this fashion, I'm taking advantage of that novelty effect late in prep so that I can still get good stimulus from my muscles even by dropping the load significantly. The other thing I've found with training is that it helps quite a bit with my performance if I consume some sodium beforehand. I think this has something to do with just your blood pressure and volume. In terms of challenges, I think the most difficult thing has been my mood and energy levels. I just came off of a month of ICU, which was very intense. You're working with critically ill patients, everyone's on a ventilator, and people would be dying on our unit pretty much every day. And I did a lot of 24-hour call shifts. It was definitely a big struggle to stay on diet, especially on my call shifts. These were a lot more intense than that 24-hour day in the life video I posted earlier. And for the most part, you didn't really sleep during that whole night. Sleep has also been a big issue where over the last few weeks since I've gotten really lean, I found that I keep waking up every 2 or 3 hours every night. I've been using melatonin to help me get to sleep, especially on the Monday and Tuesday at the beginning of the week to make sure I get to sleep early so I can wake up the next morning. As a brief aside, the main application of melatonin is in regulating your actual sleep schedule. So it doesn't necessarily make you fall asleep, but it can help you feel sleepy at the right time if you're changing your schedule. So this can definitely help with jet lag, for example. But I find it has an application for me every week when I stay up later on the weekends and have to get up earlier for the weekday Monday. In terms of caffeine, in my last video, I was just talking about starting caffeine at 100 milligrams a day. Now I've upped my dose to taking 200 milligrams every morning, which I started last week. Caffeine has been instrumental in helping me keep up my energy and concentration when I'm at work. It's actually the worst when you're trying to talk to patients or your colleagues and you just have this mental fog. All in all, things are getting tough, but we're gonna stay positive throughout this. Almost there, guys. This first show, as I mentioned before, is an untested show, so I'm definitely going to be outmuscled. We're mainly going to be using it to test out my peaking strategy and posing, and our main show is going to be coming up 3 weeks after that. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you hit like and leave me a comment below. It really helps the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.